Here is a number that should stop you. 2,000. That is the entire Filipino population of Cincinnati, the whole city, not the county, not the region. 2,000 people is smaller than a single big high school and would not fill even the practice court at the complex hosting this week's event, let alone the main stadium. Now here is what refuses to make sense. In a few days, that same city expects a stadium built for over 11,000 fans to be packed wall to wall, flags waving, loud enough to rattle a two-time Grand Slam finalist before the first serve lands. So how does 2,000 people become an 11,000-seat sellout? Where do the missing 9,000 come from? Stay anyway, because by the end you will understand why counting residents inside a city line was the wrong way to measure this. Right now, just sit with the gap. 2,000 on paper. A sold-out stadium in real life. Something does not add up, and closing that gap is the whole point of the next few minutes. But first, why does one tennis match in an Ohio city matter enough to pull a crowd like this together? Her name is Alex Eala, 21 years old. A few weeks ago, she won the biggest title of her career, her first ever WTA Tour-level singles trophy, and no Filipino player had ever done that before, not once. She now sits at a career-high ranking inside the top 20, and walked into this tournament seated higher than ever before at this level. This is not an underdog nobody has heard of. This is a rising star on the best stretch of her career, stepping onto one of the biggest stages on the calendar. And here is the part that should surprise you. This exact scene already happened before. Just days earlier, Eala played in Toronto, inside a stadium holding 12,500 people, packed with flags. That crowd makes sense on paper, because Greater Toronto holds one of the largest Filipino communities outside the Philippines itself, hundreds of thousands strong. Big population, big crowd, no mystery there. Which is exactly why Cincinnati breaks the pattern. Cincinnati has nowhere near that population, and yet the same scene, flags, noise, an overflowing stadium, is expected anyway. Here is why that matters. If the Toronto crowd is fully explained by population, and the Cincinnati crowd is not, something else has to be generating that energy, something that has nothing to do with a zip code. Pull on that thread and this stops being a story about one match and becomes a story about how loyalty actually spreads. Start with Toronto again, the first clue. 12,500 fans packed that arena, and afterward Eala said the support she felt was something words could barely hold. Not a small reaction from someone who has played plenty of crowds. Then she lost the match in straight sets. All that noise, and it did not change the scoreboard. So question 1, if that crowd could not carry her to a win, what exactly is it doing for her? Now the number supposed to explain Cincinnati. The city itself holds roughly 2,000 Filipino residents. Zoom out to the whole state of Ohio and that jumps to nearly 17,000, almost 9 times bigger. So the people expected to fill that stadium are not driving in from Cincinnati at all. They are coming from Columbus, Dayton, Cleveland, crossing hours of highway for a city that has nothing to do with where any of them live. Question 2, and this one cuts deeper. If measuring her support by one city's population was wrong here, maybe every number in this story was measuring the wrong thing entirely. Then there is the third piece, straight from Eala herself. She has talked openly about her schedule filling up, not with practice, but with commitments to fans and media, calling it proof she is becoming something bigger on tour. Not a journalist building a narrative. That is the player, in her own words, confirming her support has shifted into something new. 3 clues, and none of them close the gap alone. Toronto shows a crowd that shows up but does not guarantee a win. Ohio shows a real number nearly 9 times the city count, but maybe still not the full picture. And Eala's own words confirm none of this is random. So 17,000 sounds like the answer. Right, problem solved. Except it still assumes people only show up if they already live somewhere close by. It still treats fandom like a census count. And every clue you just heard points at the same uncomfortable conclusion. That assumption might be completely wrong. Here is the idea to throw out. Crowd size does not have to equal local population. That works for a hometown team, sure, but Eala does not have one hometown city in the United States. Think about touring musicians instead. A band can sell out an arena in a city where almost none of their biggest fans live, because fans do not wait for the show to come to their neighborhood. They get in the car and drive hours across state lines for one night. Map out where those tickets come from, and it looks nothing like the host city. That is exactly what is happening here. 17,000 was never a ceiling. It is closer to a floor, because it only counts people already living inside the state and says nothing about fans crossing in from Kentucky, from Indiana, or driving half a day because this match might not happen again for years. 2,000 was never the real number. The real question was always how far people are willing to travel, not how many live nearby. This pattern already has receipts. In Toronto, 12,500 people showed up win or lose, because the crowd was never about the score line. It was about being present for a player who represents something bigger than one match. In Washington, where Eala won that historic first title, the celebration did not stay inside tennis. The president of the Philippines personally hosted her to mark it, national recognition for a match played thousands of miles from home. Not a local fan club. That is loyalty that ignores state lines completely. So go back to the number that opened this video. 2,000 was never wrong. It was just answering the wrong question. It counted who lives in Cincinnati. It never had a chance of counting who was coming for Cincinnati. And here is the detail that makes it concrete. Center court at this tournament holds roughly 11,500 seats. You do not need all 17,000 people in Ohio to show up for that math to work. You barely need a third of them, once you add everyone crossing state lines the way they did in Toronto and Washington. A sold-out center court stops looking impossible and starts looking almost inevitable. Monday tells us if that number holds, or if 17,000 turns out too small, the same way 2,000 was. Either way, the real story already happened before a single ball gets hit. A community too small on paper just proved paper was never the right way to measure it. Tell me what you think happens. Does that stadium fill all the way? And drop your prediction before Monday, not after.